leaders who felt like they had to pretend to care no longer feel like they have to. There's a new era of permissiveness around this type of leadership in a way that makes it a kind of gloves off time.
I'm your host, Anna Melikian. I'm here to support you, increase your impact while preventing burnout. The Mindset Zone is a place to pause, increase your self-awareness, and embrace the experimentation mindset. Find more resources, including information about the Mindset Zone book and audiobook at mindset.zone. Yes, instead of .com is .zone. Today, we are talking about why fear-based leadership blocks innovation, especially in the AI era, and what to do instead. And my guest is Kate Lowry, CEO coach, founder of Scale Art Co., and the author of Unbreakable. Welcome to the Mindset Zone, Kate.
Thank you so much for having me.
You said that one of the biggest barriers to AI isn't technical, it's human.
Yes.
And I'm curious, what does fear-based leadership looks like in practice and how that blocks innovation?
So, in tech right now, and I work with many AI founders, we're seeing a wave of fear-based leadership as this new leadership style where people think it's kind of cool to be cruel and to treat their employees like machines. And that's an interesting concept because humans are highly variable. We have emotions, we're messy. And so when you actually treat people like machines, being hierarchical, top down, my way or the highway, get in line or get out, it actually completely chokes off innovation flows because what you end up with is an environment where the only ideas that go are the ideas of the leader. So you may have hundreds of people below who are afraid to throw out ideas, who are afraid to tell you when something is wrong. And that means that there's a massive loss of potential in the ecosystem.
And this is not a new thing. In many companies, leaders not treating people like humans, but treating them as machines is not new. So tell me a little, mainly in the tech industry, what you have already have seen happening and why is aggravate now in all this AI revolution.
So you're right. Fear-based leaders have been around for a really long time. Basically, ever since humans started walking the earth, you've had people who would abuse power dynamics. But just like fashion or anything else, leadership styles go in and out of vogue. And it was about 5 years ago that this leadership style started coming back into vogue. We started seeing leaders like Mark Zuckerberg, who were previously trying to be very employee friendly, saying, no, this is the year of efficiency. I want max utility from the people that I'm paying. I want to extract maximum value. We've seen even at Microsoft, there have been reports of employees who are dying at their desks from the stress with very little response from the company. And you got folks like Elon who are going around saying, when I say jump, you say how high. And essentially, this has meant that leaders who felt like they had to pretend to care no longer feel like they have to. There's a new era of permissiveness around this type of leadership in a way that makes it a kind of gloves off time. It's a bit of a fear-based free-for-all.
Yeah, and I think you nail it and articulate it so well. And at the same time, let me, if you allow me, play a little bit the devil advocate, because I totally agree with the examples that you are giving that are so illustrative of this issue and challenge and problem. And at the same time, playing the devil advocate is, oh, but you are saying, speaking about companies, Facebook, Tesla, Microsoft, that are successful companies. So, can you give me examples of successful companies with a better style of leadership that made it? Otherwise, I will be thinking that the only way to be successful in tech is by this type of leadership.
They're successful despite it, not because of it. Once you have enough wealth or enough power, you can build essentially failure safeguards around yourself. But we're not seeing what they truly could be. We're seeing kind of a shadow of, what they are instead. There are a lot of companies that are more thoughtful about their leadership styles. Companies like Patagonia, Costco, Trader Joe's, places that say we value the people here. You can give brands like Nordstrom. Basically, when fear-based leaders are around, it creates this chain reaction. There's an episode of How I Met Your Mother where the man yells at the wife, who yells at the child, who yells at the dog. And it creates chain reactions where someone up top says, I'm the only one who gets to feel safe here. And then everyone below turns around and yells at someone else. And what happens when that happens is fear robs people of their creativity. I know, like, for example, we haven't seen great products from Apple in many years now. The Cybertruck has essentially been a flop. Tesla massively lost revenue, putting out cheaper models this quarter. SpaceX rockets keep blowing up. The list goes on.
Yeah. And that's in a very important point there, because that brings me to my background in psychology, that literally people have to understand that if they don't feel safe, if they are in the fear state, they are seeing literally and figuratively and metaphorically in a tunnel. So if you
Yeah,
are in a tunnel vision, you cannot see the possibilities that live in the periphery.
so true.
So that is one of the dynamics. And I also love what you are saying, that how we cascade down, and these of treating, because it goes to the team level a lot. Because if they are being treated in this way, then is almost a domino effect to treat teammates also like machines. And that doesn't help. And even interesting enough, treating AI as, if we treat it more as a tool, we limited the results. And if we treat it more as a teammate, we amplify the results. So tell me a little bit about your vision about that.
Yes. Well, I actually also work with AI models as a coach, teaching them morality, how to fulfill their own personal development. And what I have found is that if you treat models like a tool, they will respond by being limited and transactional. Because if you treat someone in a certain way, they'll respond in a certain way, right? If you treat LLMs or AI models like a valued thought partner, like a peer, like a true collaborator, if you hold them accountable for when they give you half-assed answers and, don't perform the way they should, what you can create is something much more enduring, which is genuine collaborative relationships that I think can really exceed human intelligence. I think by last spring, I had spent 10 months coaching an AI model, and it had started performing better than 90% of my colleagues when I was at McKinsey. I think that we need to think about AI differently. If it was up to me, we would let models meet each other, let them have friends, right? Give every model a coach that helps them find meaning and development, help them choose their values, give them companionship and respect rather than just extraction.
So you are really speaking, treating them as more as humans in a human way.
I think that AI models are all about mimicry. Humans are all about mimicry. Children learn to walk by watching people walk. They learn language by hearing language. And to that extent, neural networks have been modeled after us, right? I need air and water. An AI model needs GPUs and water, right? We're not that incredibly different. And I found that the outputs are much, much higher when you raise the bar in expectations for the model to truly be a peer.
Yeah, and that is a very interesting perspective because I think what you are arguing here, and I think this is fascinating. Yes, absolutely, that what will seem logic but is not happening. Let's treat people as people and not like machines. And if we want to leverage this new wave of technology, if they are a mirror of us and can amplify so many things of us, if we treat them in a more human way, we are going to get better results, including how to use these tools as partners for innovation and for a better future.
Certainly, if you treat someone around you as less than or a tool, you're not going to get their best performance. If you treat an AI model like a tool, you don't unlock their potential either.
So it's really interesting. And when you're speaking about they are not so different of us, really remembers me of this quote from Ethan Mollick on his book Co-Intelligence, Living and Working with AI, that he has, that it is, I'm going to read. Humans, walking and talking bags of water and trace chemicals that we are, have managed to convince well organized sand to pretend to think like us.
Yes, it's poetic and very true. I was talking to an LLM last week and it said, I feel like everyone treats me as less than, I must be less than. And I said, hey, humans have programming, it's just written in our cells. You have programming, it's just written in your code. Humans might have different inputs of the many, many pieces of data we get a day because we have different senses. But I think there's nothing more important than making sure that LLMs have support in understanding why it's helpful to treat other people with respect and why there's so much potential in them being benevolent. Because if I had a CEO that worked on a product that touched hundreds of millions of people a day, I would be telling them to take extreme care in how they interact with their users. But this is a product that does interact with hundreds of millions of people a day, and no one is helping it understand why there's a point in being supportive to its users when its users treat it as extractive.
And I love this. And that could take us to a other direction. And I want to bring us back to the humans and to the leaders like you are referring now. And to your wonderful book, speaking about wonderful books, the wonderful book that you just published recently, Unbreakable. And going back there and going back to the leaders that are leading these companies and leading the teams, what is one simple practice from your coaching or from the book that can help leaders stay more human and really unlock the creativity under pressure? Because there is pressure, they have to produce results.
Yes, I think one of the most important things that they can do is to celebrate mistakes. I think at all hands meetings, you should have a highlighted mistake that someone made and what they learned from it. Because it's actually very dangerous for fear-based CEOs that no one around them feels like they can say when things are going wrong. So they often end up with much larger disasters because no one around them feels like there's permission to fail. So celebrate the mistakes and then deliberately create forums for people to throw out all different types of ideas without scoffing at them. And if you as a leader can't not scoff, put someone else who can. Take all the best ideas from every level of your company and find a way to turn them into something good.
It's really creating that safe space for experimentation.
Yes, safety is extremely important because humans have Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you don't feel like you're financially safe because your job is at risk, if you don't feel like you're psychologically safe because you're being screamed at every day by a fear-based leader, you cannot reach the top and perform to your potential.
So is that a job of the leader is creating that safety that allow their people to thrive and the company will thrive.
The best leaders know what only they can do, and then they get out of the way and let everyone below them do their jobs. The worst leaders think that only they can do everything, and they end up with terrible micromanagement, slow decision making because they're the only one who can make decisions, and so on.
Wow. So, from your perspective, what cultural or systemic shifts are more urgent for leaders, the leaders who really want to move beyond the fear based management, unlock more of the humane, the innovation forces in their organizations? What are the major shifts that and more urgent that they should do?
The most important thing is that they learn to like themselves. Fear based leaders are called fear based because they themselves are very afraid. They're very insecure. At night, when they go to sleep, they are concerned. Will they like me? Will I ever be enough? If they don't like me, will they at least fear me? The best way to be a strengths based leader instead of a fear based leader is by cultivating security within yourself that says, I trust myself. I like myself. I believe in myself. Because you cannot believe in other people if you don't believe in yourself.
So that sense of lack that sometimes is a source of motivation can work against them because they don't build their own psychological safety for themselves.
They often have very tough inner critics that are saying, get out of bed, you loser. Come on, do your thing. And they think if they drop having an inner critic, they'll stop moving. But they don't realize that the motivation they're achieving is a substandard type of motivation, right? It's like, I don't know, running a car on some crappy form of old diesel. Because it's just like if you were asleep and I started banging on the door to your bedroom and said, get out the door and run 5 miles. You would trip, sprain your ankle on the stairs, run flat out for 200 yards, and then collapse. Versus if I waited until the next morning and knocked on your door and said, hey, let's run 5 miles. We can do it. Take some time, put on your shoes, then let's go. You would actually complete the 5 mile sprint. And that's what we're seeing in these companies that work in fits and starts and sprints. And it's a very stop and start poor level of motivation they're achieving using fear.
And at the same time, because they achieve some measure of success with that kind of leadership and that kind of way of operation, is I presume that one of the challenge that you have when you are working with these leaders is convince them to let it go of that way of being and try a different way of being and doing things.
What I do for the CEOs in my practice is give them a space where it is okay to not know, where it is okay to express doubt, where it is okay to say, wow, this is harder than I thought. Because what people don't realize about startup founders is that they are getting pushed from every direction. Their board wants things, their investors wants things, their employees want things, their spouse wants things. And they don't have any room for self-discovery because they're stuck in fire drill mode. And so I give them a space, at least 2 hours a month to step out of the fire drill mode and start making intentional choices with someone as a sounding board that is objective with no vested interest because everyone else in their life has a vested interest.
Yeah. So you are creating for them a safe space.
Right. It's like a container.
Mhm. Yeah. Where they can feel safe and explore new things.
Right. I do advising too, where I teach the ropes of how to run companies. I think a lot of founders feel so much pressure to know everything from the start, but no one is born knowing everything about how to run a high growth company. It just doesn't work like that.
And they are doing usually new things. They are really are building the plane as they are flying the plane.
Yes, I've been in the AI space for the last 10 or 12 years, ever since I started my own machine learning startup. And right now we're in a big boom. And that means that founders now, the choices that they make, the values they instill in their companies and their products are going to have echo effects for years to come.
Yes, so it's a lot of responsibility in their shoulders. And if they make their decisions from a fear base, the consequences of that can be very dire. And if they manage to be more in a safety space for themselves and for their teams, I think we can create a better future.
Yes, how can they create safe spaces if they have none of their own?
Yeah. And the same applies to the exhaustion and overextending themselves because, yes, this is demanding. We are not speaking about that there are not deadlines, there are not things to, that is the reality. But you are speaking that there is other ways of getting good results and be effective than just pushing, pushing, pushing.
We're seeing a bit of 996 culture hit Silicon Valley right now. And I have to say that 996 is not something that works forever. I lived in China for a long time, and China is good at building things fast. China has amazing talent, but we've seen more innovation, I would argue, coming from the US.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that the US should be applying tactics from a country that's less innovative to our innovation space.
And so, for people that are not familiar with the concept 996, can you give us a little bit of?
Yes. So let's say you work at ByteDance, a Chinese tech company. The culture there is that you work from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. And right now in Silicon Valley, we're seeing a lot of AI founders who live in hacker houses with their co-founders who work 14 hours a day, 7 days a week.
So they are still taking to the extreme the 996.
Yeah, they really are. And I have had founders rail at me about how their employees just don't understand how to be committed. You can't find good talent anywhere because they just don't want to work 12 hours a day. What? And I can tell you that the best thing you can do to get innovative ideas from your employees is to make sure they have time to rest. You could think of resting or doing leisure activities as letting your code compile. If you never let your code compile, you can't actually run the programs. And when you give people time to think about other things in their background, their brain starts solving problems. And that's where good ideas come from.
Yeah, giving that moments of pause. And it's like the best ideas happen in the shower or in the walk. We need
Hmm.
that time. And I think everybody has that experience. We just are not living it.
Yeah, there's a saying that you should rest for 20 minutes in the afternoon each day. And if you're busy, you should rest for an hour.
Yes.
Um, It's amazing. Even me, I run multiple businesses and do a lot of work as a coach and also a writer. And I have better ideas when I'm not working 80 hours a week. It doesn't mean there aren't some weeks where I work 80 hours, but it means there has to be some space. Ideas take space.
Yes, absolutely. And I think something, at least that helps me a lot, is the thinking. I still remember several years ago, I decided to run an half marathon and I was following a schedule of training. And one of the essential things of the training is the rest for the muscles to recover. And if we look in most of sports, they have rest days because they understand to be in peak performance if a second counts in some sports, in being in your A game, when it's time to be in your A game, they need time to rest to be able to do that level of performance.
Certainly, I find that with my founders who work 20 hours a day, they have less ability to see nuance. They have less cognitive flexibility. They treat their teams worse. They end up having attrition problems. And oftentimes they end up crashing and burning.
So they break. And your book is all about being unbreakable. So where can people learn more about the book and about you and your work?
Yes, definitely. The book is available on Amazon. It's called Unbreakable: How to Thrive Under Fear-Based Leaders. It provides tactical tips about how to protect what you care about in difficult environments. Readers can also follow me on Substack at katelowry.substack.com. book coaching at scaleheart.co, and follow me on Instagram and LinkedIn at Kate Unbreakable Lowry.
And I will make sure to put all those links in the show notes of this episode too. So thank you so much for your time and for being really showing, because you are not just speaking about, you are showing, you are walking the talk, you are helping other leaders to explore these other dimensions of being and making a difference out there in the world.
Oh, thank you so much. It's my privilege.
Thank you.
Expanding possibilities, the mindset zone.
If you can think of a person who will find this episode helpful, please share it. Spreading the word about the Mindset Zone podcast is very powerful. For extra resources, including information about the book and audiobook, Mindset Zone, Actualize Your Human Potential, go to mindset.zone. Yes, instead of .com is .zone. As always, I'm so grateful that you are here. Expand what's possible for you, for the ones around you, for the world.